Before I do start this video, make sure to use my TCG player affiliate down below if you're looking for any of these singles that I talk about today. Also, this channel is sponsored by Arcane Fortress. If you're looking for the best deck boxes around, make sure to use my link down below in the description to check them out. One other way you can support the channel is by becoming a patron. There are some great benefits of being a patron to the channel, such as giveaways, deck advice, and more when you do join. Hey, what's going on YouTube? This is Devin coming back at you with another video today in PubStomp MTG, and today I'm going to be ranking my top 10 commanders from Bloomburrow, and this was a pretty fun and adorable set. There's a lot of cool creatures that got us support and love that they absolutely deserve, and you're going to see later on in the video that I'm totally biased towards a couple creature types. But with that said, I did want to give you a brief overview of how I do my rankings in this video. I first want to talk about power level, how powerful are these commanders. I also focus on uniqueness, and overall it's going to be my opinion when doing these rankings. Of course, if you do have any differing opinions, let me know down below in the comments what are your favorite commanders of the entire set. But with that said, let's waste no time. Let's get into my number 10 spot. So let's start off the list with number 10. This one is pretty powerful with Dragonhawk Fate's Tempest. This bird dragon packs the stats for 3 and 2 red as a 5/5 body with flying, and whenever it does enter the battlefield or attacks, exile the top X cards of your library or X is the number of creatures you control with power 4 or greater. You may play those cards until your next end step. At the beginning of your next end step, Dragonhawk deals 2 damage to each opponent for each of those cards that are still exiled. So there's a lot of different reasons why I do have this on my number 10 spot. This one is pretty powerful. It can be an outlet to just win the game on the spot if you exile so much cards with Dragonhawk. Let's just say hypothetically you have 5 creatures on the battlefield and then you cast Dragonhawk, have it enter the battlefield trigger, you exile the top 6 cards of your library. You could either play those spells or you could let those spells stay in exile and deal 12 damage to each opponent, and that doesn't even count if you give Dragonhawk haste. So if you gave Dragonhawk haste the same turn to enter the battlefield, let's just go back to the hypothetical situation where there's 6 total creatures with power 4 or greater on the battlefield. You exile 6 cards and then you swing in with Dragonhawk, you exile 6 more cards. 12 total cards are exiled. Then if you just let them stay in exile, you'll deal 24 damage to each opponent. Plus, not to mention, this is a bird dragon. That's a pretty cool typing, by the way. I just think it's a very cool card with very good art, and I think it's very powerful too. But let's hop on to the next one. Let's talk about my number 9 commander of the entire set. The one I wanted to focus on is Flubs the Fool. As far as a unique commander, this is pretty unique. Let's first read what it does. So for a green, blue, and a red, this legendary creature, Frog Scout, with a 0/5 body, which is kind of funny. It just has a 5 toughness for no reason. You may play an additional land on each of your turns, and whenever you play a land or cast a spell, draw a card if you have no cards in your hand, otherwise you discard a card. So this inherently has a big downside. Whenever you're casting a spell or playing a land, you have to discard a card unless you have no cards in your hand, then you get to draw a card. So this really just kind of turns you through your deck, making you more and more hellbent in a weird way. I do think this can be pretty powerful, especially if you're playing from anywhere other than your hand. The only times you really do play from your land is if you're casting more and more lands. You play a land, draw a card, play another land, then draw another card, then cast a spell, and then draw a card. In a way, it kind of reminds me of Song of Creation in a weird way, where you're casting a spell, you're drawing a card. Obviously, you have to discard a card if you have 2 or more cards in your hand. So for me, as terms as uniqueness goes, this is pretty unique. It's giving you a downside, which not a lot of commanders do give you downsides anymore, but this can be an upside if you're discarding like an escape card or anything like that. So Flubs, you might be a fool, at least you're an honest fool. But let's crawl our way into my number 8 spot. This one is pretty powerful as a lizard commander. Everybody knows him, everybody loves him. Gev's Scaled Scorch is pretty incredible. Well, at least I love this little dude. Let's read what he does. So for a black and a red, it's a 2-mana commander for a 3/2 body. It does have Ward 2, pay 2 life, and other creatures you control enter the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on them for each opponent who lost life this turn. And whenever you cast a lizard spell, Gev's Scaled Scorch deals 1 damage to target opponent. So this is essentially a toolbox in a commander. It doesn't necessarily draw you or ramp, but it definitely buffs up your creatures and could be a potential win con in your deck depending on how much lizards you throw out. And I will say that's what's kind of neat about this commander. It does have a low CMC. A lot of these commanders in Bloomburrow do have a low CMC. I mean, of course they're small animals after all, but besides that point, Gev's Scaled Scorch is going to be a really good lizard commander to come. But let's move on to my number 7 spot. This one is quite powerful for what it does. It focuses on slugs and also rats with Wick the World Mine. I almost want to say something else, but its world. So let's read what it does. Whenever it or another rat you control enters, create a 1/1 black snail creature token if you don't control a snail. Otherwise, put a +1/+1 counter on a snail you control. It does have an activated ability by paying a blue, black, and a red. Sacrifice a snail. It deals damage equal to the sacrificed creature's power to each opponent, then draw cards equal to the sacrificed creature's power. So this could be quite deadly depending on how much rats enter the battlefield constantly. You could either make a black snail or buff up that one snail creature token on the battlefield. Then having that fling effect, flinging snails all over your opponents, dealing damage equal to each of them, is going to be pretty powerful. And drawing cards, honestly, this is going to be a house and commander. Moving on to my number 6 spot, let's go to the Squirreled Away Precon deck and talk about the face commander, Hazel of the Root Bloom. This honestly may be a contender with Chatterfang as the best squirrel commander, but let me know down below in the comments if you think so. But let's dive into what Hazel does. So for 2 black and a green, legendary creature, Squirrel Druid with a 3/5 body. You can tap her to pay 2 life, tap X untap tokens you control, add X mana of any combination of colors, and at the beginning of your end step, create a token that's a copy of target token you control. If that token is a squirrel, instead create 2 tokens that are copies of it. So I do think it can be a contender for best squirrel commander, but I do think Chatterfang is a little better just being a combo engine in the command zone. But I do feel like the 2 commanders are doing something completely different. Hazel is tapping all your squirrels so that you can produce a lot of mana. Also at your end step, you are going to make a token copy of a token you control on the battlefield, whether it's a treasure token, a creature token, you name it. But of course, if it is a squirrel token, you're going to make an extra copy of it too, so that's going to be very good in this deck specifically. Well, let's shift our focus. Let's talk about my number 5 spot. We're halfway through. I'm going to talk about another Golgari commander, and this one's extremely strong with food strategies with Ygra, Eater of All. So let's first read what it does. So for 3 black and a green, it's a 6/6 body with ward, sacrifice a food. Other creatures are food artifacts in addition to their other types and have the ability pay 2 and tap a sacrifice as permanent. You gain 3 life. And of course, whenever a food is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, you put 2 1/1 counters on Ygra, Eater of All. So I feel personally this could have easily been just a 3/3 instead of a 6/6 because it's going to scale in the game very easily, putting 2 1/1 counters on it for each food that enters the graveyard. So that counts your food tokens on the battlefield. That also includes every creature on the battlefield too. You could go into a little bit of a aristocrat strategy where you sacrifice on your creatures, get Ygra even bigger, and swing in. And most of the time you're probably going to swing in for commander lethal damage unless they block it, so you want to make sure that you do get some trample or some evasion essentially for Ygra. But having the simple fact of casting a board wipe like a Toxic Deluge where you can control the amount of creatures that die in that battlefield, Ygra could get exponentially big depending on how much creatures die that turn. And most likely Ygra would be the only one standing, and you could swing in maybe commander lethal damage at somebody. So to me this is extremely powerful and pretty unique, making everything food tokens on the battlefield besides Ygra because it's going to consume everything. But let's move down the list. Let's talk about my number 4 commander of the entire set. This one is from the Commander Precon product. That is Arthur Marigold Knight. So for 2 in Jeskai color combination, it's legendary creature, Mouse Knight. It does have haste with a 4/5 body. I first have to talk about how cute this is. It's obviously very menacing looking because it could definitely like poke my eye out. Whenever it does attack and at least one other creature attack, look at the top 6 cards of your library. You may put a creature card from among them onto the battlefield tapped and attacking. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Return that creature to its owner's hand at the end of combat. So obviously the most important part about this is the fact that it does have haste because it does have an attack trigger. Obviously you need another creature to swing in with Arthur so that you can get that extra creature on the battlefield swinging. But I do like how it has no other restriction. You look at the top 6 cards of your library and whatever creature you do find, you just put it straight on the battlefield. This feels like a pretty cool commander to build around, especially with big giant creatures in your deck. You just slam them on the battlefield, attack, and then people don't really know what's coming to hit them. Even though this mouse is pretty tiny, it's definitely going to make a big impact when you're swinging with big giant creatures like Eldrazi or other big giant creatures that you could think of. But we've made it to the top 3 commanders of the set. This one is a pretty powerful one, and I did want to focus on this one specifically with Glarb Calamity's Augur. So you may not know, but if you have watched my previous video about some of the frog commanders of the set, I'm absolutely obsessed with frogs. So when I saw a lot of different frog commanders from the set, I was super excited. And when I first saw Glarb, I thought it to be really powerful because it does have Death Touch, and you may look at the top card of your library at any time, and you may play lands and cast spells with mana value 4 or greater from the top of your library. And also it does have a tap, Surveil 2, and with a 2/4 body. And that's all for 3 mana in Sultai color combination. This is essentially a toolbox commander where it does a lot of different things for you. You essentially have an extra card in your hand with the top card of your library. And if you don't like the top card of your library, or if you want to rearrange it in your way that you want to, you can Surveil 2 by tapping it. And not only that, it has Death Touch for some reason. I mean, I guess it makes sense. Plus it's any kind of mana value spell 4 or greater, so whether it's a instant sorcery, a creature, or any artifact or enchantment, you can just play those spells and play lands, so that's going to be extremely powerful in that situation. With that said, let's hop to my number number 2 spot, this one is pretty powerful, and honestly, just why did they print this card? Balin the Haymaker is extremely powerful. So let's read what it does. So it is a Naya color combination for 3 mana. It has a 4/3 body. It does have 3 different modes. Tap 2 untapped tokens you control, add 1 mana of any color. Tap 3 untapped tokens you control, you draw a card. Tap 4 untapped tokens you control, put 3 1/1 counters on Balin, a Haymaker, and it gains trample until end of turn. So if this had any creature token you could tap, that would have been fine. But the fact that you could tap any type of token on the battlefield, whether it's a treasure token, a clue token, any kind of token, is going to work with Balin. And usually with some commanders, you want to have a commander that is a toolbox, giving you mana, drawing cards, and also acting as a win con. Balin does all 3. And putting tokens on the battlefield is going to be very easy to do, so this is going to be extremely powerful and going to be a very easy strategy for a lot of people, because who doesn't like token strategies? So Balin would have been my top choice, but I do have a number 1 spot that just edged it out by a little bit. So my number 1 commander is Helga Skittish Seer. This one is very fun, and I absolutely love the art, and you know me, like I mentioned previously, I absolutely love frogs, so there's a little bias showing. I will 100% say that. But just like Balin, this is actually a pretty good engine for your deck. And weirdly enough, it's another 3 mana cost commander. Man, there's a lot of 3 mana cost commanders in this set in general. But let's read what Helga does. So for green, white, and a blue, so it's a band colored combination commander, 1/3 body. Whenever you cast a creature spell with mana value 4 or greater, you draw a card, gain 1 life, and put a +1/+1 counter on Helga. You could also tap her, add X mana of any one color, where X is Helga's power. Spend this mana only to cast creature spells with mana value 4 or greater, or creature spells with X in their mana cost. So like Balin, in a way, it does give you card advantage when you cast a creature spell with mana value 4 or greater. You also gain a life and buff it up too. Not only that, it does act as a super dork as long as you have a lot of 1/1 counters on it. Obviously, you can only use that mana to cast creatures with power 4 or greater, or creatures with X in their mana cost. But in a way, this does encourage you to play a lot of big creatures in your deck, and you know me, I love my Timmy plays. I love playing a lot of big creatures, so obviously I'm going to be building this deck because of the cute art, and it's just a great toolbox commander. So that's why for me personally, it is my favorite commander of the entire set, and that is number 1 for me. But let me know down below in the comments, what are your thoughts and opinions about this video? Also, I'd love to hear your feedback on what's your favorite commander of the entire set, or even like a top 5 commanders of the set too. I love to hear all your thoughts and feedback. This was a really fun set to review, and there's a lot of fun creatures to build around. So with all that said, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. With that out of the way, thank you for stopping by.